All right, so let us look at the structure of the plasma membrane. So to look at the structure of the plasma membrane, the first thing we got to ask ourselves is, what are the components that make up your plasma membrane? So plasma membrane is basically made up of two major components. So the two major components of the plasma membrane, so we first look at the components. So the two major components of the plasma membrane, components of the plasma membrane are, number one, lipids, and number two, proteins. Okay, so we have lipids, we have proteins. Okay, all right. Now, is that enough? No, we have to go to a certain depth, because in your, as I said, in your Form 6, the depth is important. How deep you're going is very important. All right. So this is the depth you must have. So what is the depth I need to know? Lipids is a big class. So under the lipids, okay, you must know that your components are phospholipids, which you have already studied. Okay, that's good enough. And you also have cholesterol, so which is a form of a steroid. So I'm going to avoid the steroids. I'm going to put cholesterol. Okay, so we have the cholesterol. So basically, the two lipid molecules that make up, okay, your plasma membrane are cholesterol and phospholipids. Now, what about the proteins? So as regards the proteins, we go into the classes of protein. So we divide the protein into various classes. That means the proteins that you find in the plasma membrane can be divided into various classes. Of course, when you're in a lower form, you learned it as channel proteins and carrier proteins, which is correct. But as I said, that stops at your Form 5 level. At your Form 6 level, you have to go deeper. So, for example, you have to know the proteins that we find in the plasma membrane are structural proteins. Okay, are structural proteins, which gives you or which contributes to the stability of the structure of the plasma membrane. Then you have proteins which are basically known as transport proteins. These proteins play the role of transporting moving substances across the plasma membrane. This is the pillar which is responsible for that. Okay, for moving substances across the plasma. This is where you have your carrier protein. Okay, you have your carrier protein and you have your channel proteins. So your understanding becomes more, it becomes clearer. Is that all proteins? No, you have another group of proteins which are known as enzymatic proteins. Enzymatic proteins, or sometimes, because enzymes are also known as globular proteins, you can classify them as globular proteins. Remember, this is going back to the topic of proteins. Under the topic of proteins, you learned all that. Okay, so these will be basically the enzymes. So I want you to know that all cells on the plasma membrane, you have this enzyme, because every cell will have ATP. So we need this enzyme ATPase, whose function is actually to convert your ATP. So I won't say convert, let's use the proper terminology. It should be hydrolyze. So the function of ATPase is to hydrolyze ATP to ADP, and in the process give you energy. So your energy is released. So it's very important to be present in the plasma membrane of all cells. Now, besides ATPase, you also have hydrolase enzymes. These are the common enzymes. Okay, hydrolase enzyme, and then which causes hydrolysis, and then you have what you call the transferase enzyme. Just to give you a few. All right. All right, all these are very important. Make sure you know. Okay, again, all right. So I've got structural, I've got transport, I've got enzymatic. Is that all? No, you have what we call, okay, you have receptor proteins. Receptor proteins. These receptor proteins are important. All right. Okay. As we go, we will go in detail. Or I can mention here itself. The receptor proteins are responsible for what we call cell-to-cell recognition. Okay, they go for cell-to-cell, sorry, not cell-to-cell recognition. Receptor proteins are mainly for we call chemical signaling. All right, chemical signaling for certain processes to signal the certain biochemical processes to signal certain biochemical reactions. They are receptor proteins, receptor proteins to trigger, all right, to trigger certain biochemical reactions. Okay, so for example, neurotransmitter. When the receptor protein, that means for example, a neurotransmitter is found in the interstitial fluid. The neurotransmitter goes and binds to the receptor protein. So these receptor protein, their property will be they have a specific shape and their binding sites. Their specific shape, their binding sites. So their specific shape and binding sites. Let me just put that specific shape, their binding sites to bind to these substances, such as neurotransmitters, such as hormones. So when a neurotransmitter binds to this receptor, that is signaling. Okay, the signaling a certain event to occur, certain biochemical reaction to occur. Okay, that means the transference of impulse in the case of action potential generation or transmission. Hormones, okay, if a hormone goes to the receptor protein and the hormone binds to it, it will signal a certain process to occur in the cell. Okay, this is what we call receptor proteins, and therefore they are more for chemical signaling. All right, it is in your notes I've given to you, so make sure you go through. Now there's one final protein, that's your marker protein. Okay, what's a marker protein? So in your plasma membrane, these marker proteins are basically the glycoproteins and the glycolipids. So you have the glycoprotein, okay, you have the glycolipids, okay. This one. These glycoprotein and glycolipids, among the functions will be like glycoproteins and all that. They will be for cell-to-cell recognition. This is the one for cell-to-cell recognition. What do you mean by cell-to-cell recognition? You must remember your cell is different from my cell. Okay, so in your body, your cell is called self, S-E-L-F. That's a terminology. Let's say my cell gets into your body. For example, when we do tissue transplant, when you do tissue transplant, as a donor, I donate part of my tissue to you. So my cell goes into your body. Your body, your immune system has the ability to recognize that your cell is self and my cell, which was put in as a non-self. And it will treat my cell as an antigen or even a pathogen, and it will start attacking my cell. So it will trigger the immune response. Now, what is responsible for such a response? That is because on your plasma membrane of every cell, you have marker proteins, which is due to marker proteins, which are these two substances. That's actually glycoprotein. I won't take the glycolipid because glycolipid is lipid. Come to that. We stick to glycoproteins, okay? Because here I'm talking about the protein. So under protein, it must be protein, glycoprotein. Glycolipid is not a protein. So glycoprotein. So glycoprotein is a marker protein. So this marker protein, its job is to give that cell-to-cell recognition. So it differentiates between self and non-self cells, and therefore it decides whether to trigger an immune response or to prevent an immune response. These are the type of proteins you have on your plasma membrane. These are your components of your plasma membrane. Okay, now I'm going to go to the structure of the plasma membrane. But before I go to the structure of the plasma membrane, you can take it down. All right.